"Don't stand there like a farm girl, go sit quietly in the corner," Mark hissed through clenched teeth. Emma froze, clutching her purse, her heart sinking the same way it had for 15 years. He had no idea that the woman he was embarrassed to bring to the company gala was the very person every VIP in that ballroom was searching for. That night, under the dazzling chandeliers of the Grand Meridian Hotel, Mark thought he was attending a corporate reception. But within an hour, his world would shatter. The quiet, ordinary wife he'd underestimated for years would walk to the stage, and her name, Emma Brooks, would echo through the hall as the winner of the International Dr. Hans Janssen Prize. He had spent 15 years silencing her. Now, in front of hundreds, the world would finally listen. "Can you please not stand there like a farm girl, just go sit quietly in the corner," Mark muttered, his voice tight with irritation. Emma froze for a moment, clutching her small purse. It wasn't the first time her husband made her feel invisible, but tonight something inside her told her this would be the last. Mark had no idea that the quiet woman he was ashamed of bringing to company events was the very person every VIP in that ballroom was searching for. That morning, the phone on their kitchen counter had rung twice in 5 minutes. Emma didn't look at it. Mark hated when she touched his things. But when he called her from the bedroom, his tone carried something unusual. "Emma, come here," he said, eyes fixed on his phone screen. "Tomorrow night's the annual reception at the Grand Meridian Hotel. Everyone's bringing their wives, even Foster's dragging his, well, you know." Emma blinked. In 15 years of marriage, Mark had never once invited her to a corporate event. She felt her pulse quicken, so she asked softly. "So," he sighed, "I have to take you. Otherwise, people will start talking. The marketing team's already asking where my wife is. Just don't embarrass me." Emma smiled faintly, not from joy, but from irony. Tomorrow in that same hotel, she was supposed to attend a very different event, the International Dr. Hans Janssen Prize Ceremony, honoring extraordinary contributions to children's welfare. The award she was secretly set to receive for leading the Bright Futures Kids Foundation, a charity she had built from her kitchen table, while Mark watched TV and told her little projects were a waste of time. But he didn't know that. He never cared to ask. "Fine," she said simply. "Buy something nice," Mark continued, already half-dressed in his expensive suit. "Black, simple, not too pricey. I don't want people thinking I spend too much on you." Emma nodded. 15 years of this. 15 years of being told she wasn't elegant enough, educated enough, important enough. If only he knew. That night after Mark went to bed, Emma sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee. Her laptop screen glowed softly, full of unread emails, messages from donors, partners and colleagues. One stood out from Grace Chen, her deputy at the foundation. "Tomorrow's your big day, Emma. The world will finally know who you are." Emma's fingers trembled. She hadn't told Mark a thing. How could she explain that his ordinary wife had raised over $100 million for sick children, that she worked with congressmen, CEOs and doctors from St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, that ministers and governors wrote her personal thank you letters? Tomorrow, fate would reveal everything for her. The next morning, Emma walked into Lux & Kowadi Salon, hoping to get a quick haircut before the event. She wasn't used to luxury salons, and she could feel the other women's eyes on her, their designer purses, manicured hands, their air of self-importance. "Walk-ins?" the receptionist asked, scanning Emma's simple coat. "We're fully booked. Big night tonight, the reception at the Grand Meridian." "Yes," Emma said quietly. "Oh, you're going there too?" The girl looked her up and down. "We'll squeeze you in." Emma sat in front of the mirror as a stylist brushed through her hair. Behind her, two women chatted loudly. "My husband says all the top people will be there tonight," said a blonde woman in a fur coat, Brittany Cole, the same one Mark's co-worker Daniel Foster had married. "And did you hear that new manager Mark Brooks is finally bringing his wife?" added her friend, laughing softly. "Took him, 15 years, wonder what she's like?" The blonde smirked. Probably plain, stay-at-home type. I mean, if she were impressive, we'd know her name by now. The stylist glanced at Emma in the mirror, sympathy flickering in her eyes. "You're going to look lovely," she said softly. Emma smiled faintly, though her heart ached. She remembered one of the blonde's friends, Caroline Mercer, wife of hotel tycoon Peter Grant, had once hugged her in tears after Emma's foundation saved her nephew's life. None of them knew they were gossiping about the same woman. When her hair was done, Emma paid and was about to leave when another woman walked in, tall, elegant, perfectly composed. It was Veronica Blake, the banker's wife. She paused mid-step, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Emma. "Excuse me," she said politely, "but haven't we met before?" "I don't think so," Emma replied quickly. Veronica tilted her head, frowning. "You look very familiar." Emma forced a smile. "Maybe you've seen me in the background somewhere." But when she stepped out into the drizzle, Veronica was still staring, after her realization dawning slowly. That evening, as the rain turned to mist over Manhattan, Emma stood before the mirror in her bedroom. The reflection staring back at her was no longer just Mark's wife. She wore a simple black dress, not from a designer label, but perfectly fitting. Her hair shimmered, her eyes calm and steady. Downstairs, Mark was waiting, tapping his watch. Finally. "Let's go. And remember, stay quiet, smile when needed, and don't try to sound smart. These are serious people." Emma's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Of course, dear." He didn't notice the spark in her eyes. When they stepped into the glittering lobby of the Grand Meridian Hotel, the chandeliers threw rivers of light across marble floors. Powerful men and elegant women mingled, laughter and champagne filling the air. Mark looked proud for once, holding Emma's arm, but only as an accessory. "Don't stop in the doorway," he hissed. "You look nervous." If only he knew that dozens of those serious people had already met her, shaken her hand, thanked her, cried in her arms. As the orchestra played and the crowd shimmered under golden lights, Emma looked around, feeling the weight of the moment. Tomorrow, the same people who dismissed her tonight would stand and applaud her name. Tomorrow, the woman who'd been invisible for 15 years would become unforgettable. She just didn't know how Mark would react when he discovered the truth. But fate, it seemed, had already decided to make the reveal spectacular. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. Do you think Emma should have told Mark the truth before the event, or let him find out in front of everyone? Have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you and wished you could prove them wrong? Would you forgive a partner who spent years making you feel small once they finally saw your true worth? Type yes. If you believe silence can be the most powerful revenge, or no, if you think truth should always come first. The Grand Meridian shimmered like a palace of glass and gold that night. Every step Emma took echoed through the marble lobby, mingling with the laughter of New York's elite. Crystal chandeliers dripped light over silk gowns and tuxedos. Mark walked beside her, chin-raised smile carefully rehearsed. To him, this was a night to impress his bosses. To Emma, it was the night the universe would finally stop pretending she was invisible. "Don't stand there," Mark whispered through clenched teeth as they entered the banquet hall. "You'll draw attention." "Isn't that the point of these events?" Emma replied softly, but he didn't notice the quiet irony in her tone. They were ushered to their table right in the middle of the glittering chaos. Around them sat executives, politicians, and their perfectly polished wives. One of them, Brittany Cole, flashed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, so you must be Mark's wife," she said, her gaze sweeping from Emma's simple black dress to her modest clutch. "You're braver than I imagined." Emma smiled gently. "Why's that?" "Well," Brittany said, leaning in conspiratorially, "most women would feel out of place here if they hadn't, done much with their lives." Mark chuckled awkwardly. "Emma's not really a career type. She's more into a volunteer work." "Volunteer work?" The words hit like glass shattering. The table laughed politely, and Emma looked down at her champagne, the bubbles rising like ghosts. She wanted to tell them that her volunteer work had built a network of pediatric clinics across the country, that senators and CEOs came to her for advice, but not tonight. Tonight, she would let the truth speak for itself. At the next table, Emma noticed Congressman Harold Whitman, a tall, dignified man she'd once met when her foundation partnered with his education initiative. He caught her gaze briefly, frowning, as if trying to remember where he'd seen her. The evening rolled on with speeches and clinking glasses. Then came the announcement, "Ladies and gentlemen," the host said, his voice booming through the speakers. In the ballroom next door, we are honored to present the Dr. Hans Janssen International Prize for Outstanding Contribution to Children's Welfare. All guests are invited to join us. Emma froze. Mark looked annoyed. What now? Another boring charity thing? Let's go, Emma whispered. They followed the crowd into the adjoining hall, a world transformed. The air buzzed with anticipation, cameras flashed. On stage stood Michael Adams, the host in a flawless tuxedo. Behind him, giant screens displayed smiling children faces Emma knew. Mark leaned closer. Looks fancy. Must be for some billionaire's wife who donates her husband's money. Emma didn't answer. Her pulse drummed like thunder. Every 3 years, said Adams, this award honors an individual whose work has changed the lives of children worldwide. This year, the jury considered 43 nominees from 20 countries. Photos of hospitals and clinics flickered across the screen. Then came the slide Emma dreaded and waited for. Bright Futures Kids Foundation. Her breath caught. Mark squinted at the image. Wait, isn't that the one He didn't finish. The foundation continued. Adams has raised over $100 million in private donations, creating 12 treatment centers and saving the lives of more than 500 children. The crowd gasped. Applause rippled through the room. Mark's expression shifted from boredom to disbelief. That's your foundation, he muttered. Emma's lips barely moved. Yes. And the award goes to... The host opened a golden envelope. The pause that followed stretched like eternity. To Emma Brooks, founder and director of the Bright Futures Kids Foundation. The room exploded in applause. People stood cheering, clapping, calling her name. Cameras swung like spotlights, searching for their star. Then there it was, the beam of light landing on Emma's table. Mark's face turned pale. Emma! But she was already standing. Her legs trembled as she stepped forward. Faces blurred, voices melted into a single roar of disbelief and admiration. Men who'd once ignored her now reached out to shake her hand. Women who'd whispered behind her back dabbed at their eyes. When she reached the stage, Michael Adams extended the crystal trophy toward her. "Mrs. Brooks," he said with a warm smile, "you've given hope to thousands. Congratulations." Emma's fingers closed around the heavy award. For the first time in her life, the weight she carried felt beautiful. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing through the microphone. 5 years ago, I was just a housewife. I didn't have a career, a title, or even confidence. My husband thought I wasn't capable of much. And maybe back then I believed him. Gasps filled the room. Emma could see Mark sinking lower in his chair. But one day I read a story about a little girl who needed life-saving surgery. Her parents couldn't afford it. I thought maybe I could help. I started a fundraiser from my kitchen table. We raised $2 million in a week. That moment changed everything. Photos appeared behind her, Sophie Cruz, smiling with a stuffed bear. Ethan Walters walking again after a miracle treatment. These children taught me something, Emma continued. You don't need permission to make a difference. You don't need approval to believe in your purpose. You just have to care enough to act. Applause thundered again, louder, longer. Tears shimmered in the eyes of Caroline Mercer, who stood and shouted, "You saved my nephew's life, Emma." Others joined in, parents, doctors, donors, all rising to their feet. Down in the audience, Mark sat frozen. Around him, executives who once dismissed his plain wife now turned, murmuring in awe. "Your wife," they mouthed. "That's your wife." He didn't move. He couldn't. On stage, Emma looked down at him one last time. Their eyes met hers, calm, radiant, his a storm of disbelief and regret. "Tonight," she said softly into the microphone, "is not just about me. It's about every person who was ever told they weren't enough. Every dreamer who worked in silence while others laughed. Every woman who was made to feel small but chose to stand tall anyway." The hall erupted again, people chanting her name. Cameras flashed like lightning. In that blinding glow, the years of humiliation, of tears and quiet nights burned away. Emma Brooks was no longer anyone's shadow. She was her own light, and the whole world could see it. As the orchestra swelled and the audience rose in a standing ovation, Mark quietly slipped out of his seat. For the first time in 15 years, he wasn't the one being admired. He was the man left behind. And for the first time, Emma didn't care. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. If you were Emma, would you have forgiven Mark after this moment or walked away forever? Do you think success is the best revenge against those who doubt you? Type yes if you believe true strength is built in silence, or no if you think it needs to be seen to be respected. Snow was falling softly over Manhattan, turning the city into a silver dream. 3 months had passed since that unforgettable night at the Grand Meridian. The headlines had faded, but Emma Brooks's life had changed forever. Her foundation, Bright Futures Kids, had grown beyond imagination. Donations poured in from across the country. Volunteers tripled. The White House had even invited her to speak about children's healthcare reform. And for the first time, she had an office of her own, bright filled with laughter, and walls covered in children's drawings sent from hospitals her foundation supported. On her desk sat a framed photograph from the award night. She wasn't posing for the camera, just smiling, genuine, unguarded, free. That morning, Grace Chen walked in holding 2 cups of coffee. "You've got a visitor," she said with a knowing smile. "Do you want me to send him in?" Emma didn't ask who. She already knew. When Mark Brooks stepped inside, the air shifted. He looked older, quieter. There were deep lines around his eyes, not from age, but from the weight of regret. In his hands, he carried a bouquet of white roses, her favorite. "Can I sit?" he asked softly. "Of course," she replied, gesturing to the chair opposite her. Mark looked around the office, taking in the awards, the framed thank you letters, the shelves of neatly labeled files. "You've built something incredible," he said quietly. Emma nodded. "Not alone, it's a team effort." He smiled faintly. "You always say that, even when it's obvious you're the heart of it all." For a moment, silence hung between them, filled with all the words they'd never said. Then he spoke. "I wanted to tell you, I filed for divorce." "I know," Emma said calmly. Mark nodded, his voice trembling. "I also wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything, for the years I made you feel small, for the nights I didn't listen, for not seeing you when you were right in front of me." Emma looked at him gently. "I forgave you a long time ago, Mark. On that balcony the night everything changed." He swallowed hard. "I still don't understand why you forgive me." "Because anger is a cage," she said softly, "and I've lived caged long enough." Mark's eyes glistened. "Do you ever think we could start over? Not as husband and wife, just as 2 people who finally learned to see each other." Emma smiled a warm, kind smile that carried no bitterness. "Maybe, someday. But right now, I have a world full of children waiting for help. That's where I belong." Mark nodded slowly. "You've become someone extraordinary." "No," Emma corrected gently. "I just stopped being afraid of who I already was." He stood, placing the roses on her desk. "Goodbye, Emma." "Goodbye, Mark," she said, watching as he turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused and looked back one last time, his voice barely above a whisper. I hope one day someone loves you the way you've loved the world. When he was gone, Emma sat still for a long moment. The city stretched beneath her window, alive, restless, full of stories. She glanced at her reflection in the glass. There was peace there now, not pride, not sorrow, just quiet strength. Her phone buzzed. A message from Helen Park, mother of little Aidan, one of the Foundation's miracle children. The doctors say Aidan's surgery was a success. He's coming home next week. Thank you for giving him a future. Emma's heart swelled. She picked up her coat and hurried downstairs, the snow crunching beneath her boots. Outside, children's laughter echoed through the park across the street. She stood for a moment, watching them chase snowflakes, their joy unfiltered and pure. A small boy stumbled, his mitten falling into the snow. Emma bent down, helped him up, and smiled. His mother called from a distance. "Thank you," Emma waved back. "You're welcome." As she straightened, she realized that life had come full circle. Once she'd been a woman standing in the shadows, doubting her worth. Now she was a light for others. But she hadn't done it for fame or applause. She did it because she couldn't bear to see suffering and do nothing. That evening, back in her office, Grace knocked again. "There's one more thing," she said. "A letter from UNICEF." Emma opened the envelope. It was an official invitation to lead an international program expanding pediatric care in developing countries. For a moment, she closed her eyes. Her heart beat faster, but not from fear. It was the quiet thrill of purpose calling her forward once again. She took out a pen and began to write her reply, yes. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the city in soft white light. Emma stood by the window, watching the world below a world she no longer feared to face. She touched the faint mark on her ring finger where a wedding band once rested. The skin had healed, but the story remained. A story not of betrayal, but of rebirth. That night, Emma spoke to her team before leaving. "Remember," she said, "what we do isn't charity, it's hope. Every child we help is a reminder that compassion still matters. Don't ever let anyone tell you your kindness is small. Kindness," she smiled, "can move mountains." As she stepped outside, the city lights sparkled like stars, and the sound of distant laughter wrapped around her like music. For the first time in years, she felt completely, beautifully free. She walked down the snowy sidewalk, her breath misting in the cold air, and whispered to herself, "The best part of my story isn't what I achieved, it's that I finally became who I was meant to be." Somewhere out there, hundreds of children were alive because she refused to give up. Somewhere a husband learned humility. Somewhere a stranger found courage after hearing her story. And somewhere deep inside her, the quiet, forgotten woman she used to be smiled finally at peace. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. How did this story make you feel? Did Emma's journey remind you of someone in your life? Do you believe forgiveness can be a form of strength, not weakness? If you felt inspired by Emma's story, type 100 in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Let's see how many countries this message of hope can reach. And don't forget to share this video because someone out there might need a reminder that it's never too late to rise again.